Thank you for your hard work up until now.
He said with a tone that belied the years of shared history between them. His voice, once warm and familiar, now carried a chilling detachment. The room, filled with the memories of a life built together, seemed to shrink around Linda as she absorbed the weight of his words.
It took longer than I expected, but finally the burden is gone.
He kept talking like that without making eye contact with me.
You might have been too naive to notice, but Jennifer is always the one I truly wanted. I've been tolerating this situation because Jennifer didn't want to live with or take care of anyone else. But now, I'm free from that worry. So, let's get a divorce.
I'm sorry it had to be this way. I guess we both knew it was coming, didn't we? I was fine with parting ways, but he insisted that he needed me.
Jennifer's words, delivered with a smug smile, were a stark contrast to the turmoil churning inside me. As I watched her husband and his mistress exchange satisfied glances, I couldn't help but wonder how far their deceit had gone. The stage was set, the actors in place, and I was ready to begin my counterattack. My name is Linda, and I'm 40 years old. I'm a full-time housewife and have been married for 15 years. I met my husband, John, at the company we both joined as fresh graduates. John, who was my mentor at work, patiently guided me, a newbie who barely knew her way around the professional world. It didn't take long for me to fall for him, a reliable man 5 years my senior. Back then, his kindness seemed genuine to me, a naive young woman unaware of the world's ways. However, now I understand that it was just an illusion of my inexperienced self. When John proposed to me, I was over the moon. After a few years of dating, we got married. Post-marriage, I ended up living with my mother-in-law, Carol, at the family home. Initially, I was reluctant about living with her, as I'd heard various problems could arise from such arrangements. But John, being the youngest child, had a deep concern for Carol, who was already advanced in age. His father had passed away a few years prior, and he couldn't bear the thought of leaving his elderly mother alone. I found his concern reasonable and was moved by his kindness towards his family. At that time, I was deceived by his seemingly kind intentions and quit my job at his behest. I had just started to enjoy my work, having learned the ropes, so I was reluctant to leave. But I was swayed by his words.
I worry about leaving Mom alone. It's enough if you just stay at home. I'll support us financially, so I want you to take care of the home.
Convinced by these words, I agreed to resign. Fortunately, living with Carol wasn't as troublesome as I had feared. In fact, she doted on me like her own child. To me, she was like my grandmother. There was no typical mother-in-law harassment, and our relationship was harmonious. When got married, Carol was still full of energy, making those early days of marriage enjoyable as I learned the ropes of household chores with Carol's guidance. However, it wasn't long before John's true colors started to show. Or perhaps more accurately, John probably thought that once we were married, he would get his way. The reliable man Linda knew before marriage seemed to have vanished, replaced by a selfish nature where he wouldn't lift a finger for himself. He acted like a small child, expecting me to take care of everything for him. Being a homemaker, I accepted that managing the household was my responsibility, but John's expectations went beyond reasonable. He took for granted that meals were prepared and served without a word of thanks. While he never missed an opportunity to complain, saying things like,
I'm not in the mood for pizza today.
And if he didn't get the first bath, he'd sulk, yet he'd delay it for his favorite TV shows. It was also common for him to come home late from drinking outings, expecting Linda to wait up for him. After Carol's bath, I would finally get her turn, often quite late. Furthermore, John left all the preparations, like laying out clothes for the next day, entirely to me. He'd just wear whatever I picked out, treated almost like an infant with everything done for him. Well, when my Carol was healthy, that was fine. Carol was diligently taking care of my husband, so it wasn't a huge burden on me. Carol, with a mix of amusement and exasperation, would often share.
John was our little miracle, born later in our lives, so I guess I just couldn't help but spoil him. He's still holding on to habits from his childhood, and for that, I am sorry. I probably do too much for him, making him think it's all normal.
She would add, her voice tinged with a gentle self-reproach. Yet, when I compared the John at home to the John the first knew from the office, his transformation was startling to me. His mother's struggle to cut the proverbial apron strings was undoubtedly part of the issue. I had to accept the relationship between them as it is. However, our routine life was dramatically upended one fateful day. Carol, in an unfortunate turn of events, slipped and tumbled down the stairs, resulting in a broken leg and hip, which subsequently necessitated constant care. To add to the complexity, this calamity struck at the most inopportune moment for me. I had just discovered the joyful yet daunting news of my pregnancy with our second child. Here I was, grappling with my own health, needing tranquility and rest, suddenly thrust into the whirlwind of caring for Carol. Juggling the needs of Sophia, our elder daughter, my own challenging pregnancy, and now the added responsibility of looking after Carol was overwhelming. Naively, I had harbored hopes that John would step up and adapt to our evolving family dynamics. How utterly mistaken I was in that hopeful assumption. John, unchanging and immovable, remained as he always was. Amidst these trying circumstances, John seemed oblivious to my plight. He relentlessly delegated his responsibilities to me, unaffected by the changes in our lives. Now, with my mother-in-law immobilized, all her daily responsibilities have inevitably become my burden. Amidst this overwhelming situation, I remember having a heart-to-heart with my husband. "Honey, considering your mom's deteriorating condition, and with me being pregnant, it's getting tougher for me. I desperately need more help around the house. Can't you at least manage your own things?"
What are you even talking about? I'm out there every day, working tirelessly to support us. Do you even remember why I wanted you to leave your job?
Sure, if I weren't carrying our child, I'd probably be more active. But I'm grappling with this severe morning sickness, barely able to keep myself together.
Do you take it for granted that pregnant people are treated like princesses? Pregnancy is not a disease. Some women work up until the last days of their pregnancy. You should feel blessed that you're able to stay home.
The truth is, I never wanted to quit my job. It was a decision forced upon me by my husband. At that point in our marriage, any semblance of love from him had completely vanished. Reflecting back, I realize this lack of affection has been a constant since our early days as a married couple. His demeanor changed drastically after our wedding. To him, it must have felt like he had gained a free housekeeper. Perhaps that was his intention right from the beginning. Yes, that has to be the truth. His attitude and actions all start to make sense when I view them through this lens. Battling relentless morning sickness. I found myself juggling the endless demands of household chores, providing care for my mother-in-law, and tending to every need of my husband John. Each day, the thought of fleeing crossed my mind, but the unborn child within me anchored my resolve, making the idea of divorce not so straightforward. I couldn't bear the thought of deliberately choosing to raise my child without a father's presence. Furthermore, the guilt of abandoning Carol, who had always showered me with kindness, weighed heavily on my conscience. Carol, in her usual gentle manner, kept apologizing for her incapacitated state, pushing herself in rehabilitation, hoping to regain some independence. But age was not on her side, and despite her determined spirit, her physical strength continued to diminish day by day. Carol even bravely suggested to John that it might be best for her to move into a care facility.
John, I am aging, and it's only a matter of time before I deteriorate further.
She expressed with concern.
I've already imposed so much on Linder. Who knows, soon I might not even be able to keep my mind clear. I believe entering a facility before that happens is the right thing to do. I don't want to be a greater burden on you two than I already am.
John, however, responded with frustration.
Mom, it's easy for you to say that, but do you know the cost of care facilities? We have someone right here willing to care for you. Why make unreasonable demands? Why do you think I married her in the first place?
I couldn't contain my shock. John, how can you talk to your own mother like that? After everything she's done for us. What exactly are you implying? What role do I play in your life? Have you ever truly loved me, or was I just a convenience from the beginning?
Enough of this nonsense. It's making me sick. Everyone's just spouting selfish things.
John grumbled irritably.
I need to clear my head. I'm going out for a drink. You all better have thought this through by the time I return.
Leaving those harsh words hanging in the air, John stormed out of the house. Carol realized her parenting mistakes and tearfully apologized to me.
I'm so sorry, Linda. I've caused you so much trouble because of my actions.
Carol confessed, her voice laden with regret.
We spoiled John too much, and that's why he grew up without empathy.
She admitted, acknowledging their part in his upbringing.
I never imagined he would become so selfish.
She said, disappointment seeping through her words. Carol, please don't blame yourself. It's not your fault. I consoled her, trying to alleviate her self-reproach. I was wrong too, always following his orders. I admitted, expressing my empathy with her.
You won't find happiness staying here. I'll manage on my own. So please, get away from this place.
She urged, concerned about my future. Don't say that. I can't just abandon you and leave. I asserted, expressing my deep affection and commitment to staying by her side. You've always been so kind to me. I consider you as my real family. I said sincerely, showing my gratitude towards her.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you so much.
She repeated, gripping my hands and shedding tears of appreciation. Seeing her tears, a deep anger towards John stirred within me. It was his fault she was suffering this much. I need to be strong, I told myself, determined to change. I had to protect not just my mother-in-law but our children as well. I couldn't be the same person I was before. I vowed to transform myself. As time passed, both of our children grew into elementary schoolers, bringing some relief from constant care, yet they still required plenty of attention. Meanwhile, Carol's health deteriorated steadily, and now she's completely bedridden. Thankfully, her mind remains sharp, and we can communicate without issues, a small blessing in our challenging situation. Household chores and caregiving are a challenge, but as my children have grown up, they have come to help me. In contrast, my husband increasingly stayed away from home. He claimed that watching his mother age was too painful, but his behavior suggested it was just a convenient excuse. I had no idea what he was up to. Driven by suspicion, I hired a private investigator to look into his activities. After a decade of caregiving, my mother-in-law passed away. I had braced myself for this moment, but the finality of loss hit me harder than I anticipated. The grief lingered even after the funeral. As we finished the cremation and bid farewell to the attendees. About to return home with the children, John, who had become a stranger of sorts, approached me. Our conversations had become a rarity. During the funeral, as the chief mourner, he maintained a facade, shedding tears, yet he seemed unaffected in private. Moreover, he was conspicuously absent during his mother's final moments, choosing to be elsewhere. His insensitive approach left me void of any affection for him. Wiping tears, I turned back to him with a gaze filled with anger. What do you want? Standing next to John was his colleague, Jennifer, who was once a colleague of mine as well. With a sneer, he said, "What's with that attitude?" Well, I'm in a good mood right now, so I'll let it slide. Despite it being the day he parted with his mother, he was in a good mood. I felt a deep pain in my heart at his callousness. Just get to the point and tell me what you want, I urged him. He replied irritably.
PCH, you used to be somewhat charming, but now you've become a detestable old hag. Well, it doesn't matter anymore. You're no longer needed.
I waited for his words. Seeing me, he joyfully continued his speech, while Jennifer laughed along loudly.
Lost for words due to shock. Well, thanks for your troubles until now.
He taunted.
It took longer than expected, but finally the burden is gone. In other words, you're no longer needed,
he declared.
You were too foolish to realize, but Jennifer has always been my true choice,
he revealed.
I've been enduring because Jennifer didn't want to live together or take care of anyone, but now that worry is gone,
he continued. Then, he demanded.
So, let's get a divorce.
Jennifer added.
Sorry about this. I was fine with parting ways, but he insisted he wanted me.
With smirks on their faces, they gazed at me. I turned to my husband with a big smile on my face, trying to mend my expression, which was almost distorted with disgust. That's right. I'm glad I didn't have to be the one to say it. I said, a hint of relief in my voice. I reached into my bag and rummaged through it, finally pulling out a piece of paper.
What's that?
John asked, his face a mix of confusion and surprise. It's the divorce papers. I replied calmly. The document in my hand symbolized the end of our relationship.
Why? Why would you?
His voice trembled. He hadn't anticipated this turn of events. Why? You just said it yourself. You wanted a divorce. Don't talk nonsense. I retorted, my voice firm and confident. I felt in my heart that our marriage was beyond repair. My husband and his affair partner seemed taken aback. Perhaps they expected me to be shocked and cling to them. But my reaction was contrary to their expectations.
Really? Are you sure about this?
He asked, his voice tinged with anxiety and surprise. Of course, I am. Can you hold on a minute? I asked, reaching for my smartphone. The motion was familiar as I prepared to make a call. Excuse me, are you still nearby? I asked the person on the other end of the phone, my voice filled with hope. I was wondering what to do after my husband brought it up. I continued, my voice calm yet swirling with various emotions inside. Yes, I understand. I responded to the person on the other end. I'll be waiting for you here, then. I said before hanging up. I was resolute.
Who was that?
John inquired, his voice laced with irritation and unease. It seems talking just between us won't get through to you too. I answered. My voice was calm, but my words carried a strong determination. Let's get a third party involved. Soon, a man dressed in funeral attire made his entrance. My lawyer, I declared with a sense of finality. I'd prefer if you'd communicate through him from now on.
What?
He voices, a mix of confusion and surprise evident in his tone.
A pleasure to meet you. I am Thomas, the attorney representing your wife. We have been discussing the possibility of a divorce for quite some time.
The lawyer introduces himself, his voice carrying a professional and somewhat detached tone.
I was also present at the funeral today. I understand you've initiated discussions about divorce.
Thomas adds, maintaining a polite yet firm demeanor.
Wait a second, you don't have the funds to pay for a lawyer.
He interjects, his voice rising with incredulity and anger. Carol generously offered to cover the expenses. It seems there was a significant amount of savings, including inheritances and pensions from your in-laws. She had been saving diligently over the years with you in mind, avoiding frivolous expenses. However, after witnessing your recent behavior, she decided to leave everything to me.
What?
This is your mother's will. It clearly states that all assets, including real estate, are to be inherited by you, the wife.
The lawyer elucidated, presenting the document with a professional air.
What are you saying?
John responded, his voice laced with shock and a growing sense of panic. He hastily grabs the paper from the attorney, scanning it with furrowed brows and a mounting sense of anger. After finishing, he attempts to tear and discard the document in a sudden burst of fury.
That's a futile gesture. The original document is safely in my possession.
The lawyer stated calmly, unaffected by the outburst.
Additionally, this contains evidence of your affairs and instances of domestic harassment.
Thomas pointed out, holding up another set of documents.
Why?
I grew suspicious of your lengthy absences from home and decided to hire a detective agency. I explained. He uncovered an abundance of proof of your infidelity. It's time you stop underestimating me. I have recorded every instance of verbal abuse directed at Carol and myself. Didn't you notice the cameras? He probably didn't even notice the subtle changes around the house. John, frustrated, retorted.
Then why didn't you say anything before?
With a mix of resignation and determination, I replied. It was always for your mother, Carol. If I left, I knew you wouldn't take care of her properly.
You mean you've been silent all this time, just for a woman who isn't even your real mother?
John's disbelief was evident in his tone. Yes, that's exactly it. I asserted. Unlike you and Jennifer, I have empathy. Carol has always been kind to me. Even though she's not related by blood, she's as much family as anyone else to me. I've endured so much to protect her. My voice trembled with emotion. Jennifer, the other woman in John's life, found herself unexpectedly involved.
Why should I pay anything? It's only fair.
Linda stated firmly. You both deceived me for so long. Thomas, Linda's lawyer, chimed in.
Our investigation shows that you two were involved even before John married Linda. Given the extent of the affair and harassment, we're asking for a substantial sum.
Thomas added, his professionalism masking his disapproval. The amount suggested by the lawyer sent John and Jennifer into an uproar.
That's an impossible amount to pay.
It's outrageous to even suggest we'd agree to that.
Jennifer protested.
Is that so?
Thomas replied coolly.
If you disagree, we'll have to settle this in court. But with the evidence we have, I doubt you'll have much of a chance. Court would mean additional expenses. Are you sure you want to go down that route?
Thomas inquired, his tone even but firm. John, overwhelmed by the situation, buried his face in his hands, muttering curses under his breath. Jennifer, filled with a blend of scorn and mocking defiance, let loose a cascade of cutting words, her voice dripping with disdain.
You know, I never really had any affection for you. I was just with you for the lavish way you spent money on me.
She sneered, her eyes cold and unfeeling. John, feeling a sharp sting of betrayal, his voice trembling with shock and disbelief, could barely articulate his feelings.
What? Are you really turning your back on me now?
He stammered, his world seemingly crumbling around him. Unmoved by his evident distress, Jennifer continued her merciless verbal onslaught.
Please, don't be so naive. Someone like you, devoid of any charming qualities, how could anyone genuinely love you? Strip away your money, and you're just an unremarkable, tedious man who can't conceal his balding head.
She spat out the words with venomous contempt.
I'm done tolerating you. I'm leaving this charade.
She declared, her voice cutting through the tense air like a knife. With a final look of derision, Jennifer turned on her heel, her departure marked by the sharp, echoing click of her heels against the hard floor. And, just for the record, I tossed over her shoulder. I fully intend to go after every penny of alimony I'm owed. I hate to add insult to injury, but let's not forget about the child support. Even though you've been less than stellar as a father, these children are still legally yours. They deserve your financial support, at the very least. I added.
Child support. If it comes down to that, I refuse to relinquish custody. I'll take the kids and you can pay me the child support.
John retorted, his voice a mix of desperation and defiance. This declaration was met with immediate and vehement opposition from the children, who until now had been silently absorbing the unfolding drama.
No way. You've always just bossed us around at home, never lifting a finger to help us.
They burst out, their voices a chorus of frustration and resentment.
We can't stand you, Dad. Just leave us alone.
They cried, their words cutting through the tension-filled room like a sharp, cold wind. Their harsh rejection struck John like a physical blow, silencing him. His mouth moved wordlessly, as if desperately searching for some form of rebuttal or justification, but no words came. Finally, with a defeated air, he turned to the legal documents laid out by the lawyer. He signed them, each stroke of his pen a silent admission of his defeat. I watched him go, a complex mix of emotions swirling within me, relief, exhaustion, and a faint trace of sorrow. The long, tumultuous chapter of my life was finally coming to a close. Let me tell you about the aftermath. To prevent my ex-husband from escaping responsibility, I received a lump sum of alimony and child support from him. It turns out my ex-husband had been spending a lot of time with Jennifer and had almost no savings left. So, he had to resort to borrowing money to pay off what he owed me. On the other hand, dealing with Jennifer became a bit of a chase, she was evading any confrontation. So, my lawyer and I had no choice but to go to her workplace. As a result of our visit, the affair between my ex-husband and Jennifer became public knowledge at their company. This led to both of them being fired. Had they just admitted their mistakes willingly, none of this would have been necessary. Following this, my ex-husband blamed Jennifer, but it was all a consequence of his own actions. Having spent their savings on the alimony and now jobless, they both struggled even with daily living. Being of a certain age, finding a new job wasn't easy for them. They were reduced to doing odd jobs to get by. After losing their homes, they reluctantly started living together in a rundown apartment, but a broken relationship doesn't mend easily. Their constant fights led to neighbors calling the authorities, and they were eventually evicted from that dilapidated apartment as well. To make matters worse, the place where my ex-husband borrowed money from turned out to be quite shady. With payments lagging, the debt only grew larger. Now, they are living in a place recommended by those dangerous people, being forced to do difficult jobs. Unable to reduce their debts, escape seems like an impossible option for them. Jennifer was tragically sold into a night job, a shocking revelation I stumbled upon when my ex-husband, in a rare moment of vulnerability, reached out for help. I can still recall that call, his voice, quivering with desperation, pleading for my assistance. But the well of my sympathy had long run dry. His pleas were met with nothing but my derisive laughter before I coldly severed the call. The ensuing days were marked by a barrage of calls from him, each one a jarring reminder of his desperate situation. Yet, I remained resolute, letting each call go unanswered. With time, the frequency of his calls diminished, eventually fading into silence. His well-being, or lack thereof, has ceased to be a concern of mine. In stark contrast, my life has blossomed in the wake of his absence. Freed from the shackles of his unjust treatment, I now revel in days filled with joy and contentment, shared with my beloved children. Our bond has deepened, fortified by our shared experiences and newfound happiness. The inheritance left by Carol was a substantial windfall, far exceeding our expectations. Additionally, the alimony from my ex-husband and Jennifer has been nothing short of a blessing. As I look to the future, my heart is set on nurturing this blissful existence with my children. We are committed to preserving this home, a cherished legacy of my mother-in-law. I feel her benevolent gaze upon us, her spirit a comforting presence, watching over us from the heavens.